Why would a mother risk everything? Her dignity, her reputation, even her last remaining ties to royalty, for two children who might not even be who she claims. That's not just tabloid chatter anymore. It's the question burning behind closed palace doors, inside press war rooms, and whispered by sources who once swore they'd never speak. Because just days ago, a sealed request landed on King Charles's desk in Clarence House. A formal letter. Polished. Direct. Demanding, even. In it, Meghan Markle, former Duchess of Sussex, self-proclaimed royal exile, asked for her children, Archie and Lilibet, to receive newly conferred royal titles. Not symbolic ones. Not honorary. But official royal status. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And that, dear viewers, is where the monarchy drew the line. This wasn't just another Meghan headline. This was a spark hurled into a centuries-old institution already smoldering from scandal, grief, and political upheaval. And when that spark caught fire, it didn't just threaten the Sussex name. It scorched the very concept of royal legitimacy. So the king did something unprecedented. Something Queen Elizabeth, in her quiet diplomacy, had refused to do. King Charles III invoked powers that haven't been touched in nearly 100 years. He stripped Meghan Markle of every remaining trace of royal honor, formally, finally, and completely. But why now? And more importantly, what did he uncover that made him act? Because this isn't just a story about a former actress asking for a bit more glitter on her children's stationery. No, this is a story of hidden documents, vanishing records, legal loopholes, medical oddities, and the unspoken fear that perhaps, just perhaps, the entire lineage being claimed isn't quite what it seems. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, just another royal drama, consider this. Why has Meghan never released full birth documentation for either child? Why have neither Archie nor Lilibet been seen in any verifiable public setting for years? Not even during key family events where they were expected. Why does even the press refer to them with odd caution, as if walking on eggshells? And why, after being content for so long with the Duke and Duchess titles, did Meghan suddenly demand something far more dangerous? Something constitutional? Let's rewind a bit. Back when Harry and Meghan exited the royal family in 2020, the palace agreed to a soft severing. They kept their Duke and Duchess titles. They were asked not to use HRH, His or Her Royal Highness, in official capacity. It was a compromise, a quiet one, designed to keep the institution's dignity intact while giving the couple the freedom they claimed to want. But from the moment they touched down in Montecito, that freedom seemed conditional. They launched Archewell, signed megadeals with Netflix and Spotify, gave interviews that, for all intents and purposes, shredded what little goodwill remained between them and the crown. Oprah, Anderson Cooper, The Cut. They painted themselves as victims of an ancient, racist institution. The monarchy, Meghan implied, was cold, calculated, and uncaring, even toward her unborn child. And still, King Charles did not retaliate. Even after Prince Philip died, even after Queen Elizabeth passed, even as public confidence in the royal institution wavered under waves of sensationalism, Charles held his tongue. He stayed the course, perhaps out of fatherly love, perhaps out of fear of the backlash, perhaps because he hoped, deep down, that Harry might return, repentant, wiser, older. But then Meghan sent the letter. That's where it changed. And it wasn't a private email. It was a formal request, routed through the legal team at Archewell, CC'd to the Privy Council, and laced with language that suggested one thing loud and clear. If Charles refused to comply, Meghan was prepared to go public. The title request was specific. Meghan wanted Archie to be styled as His Royal Highness Prince Archie of Sussex. She wanted Lilibet to be recognized as Her Royal Highness Princess Lilibet Diana of Sussex. Not in name only, in legal standing. With full acknowledgement from the royal family, crown documents, diplomatic registers, and historical records. She wanted it all. And that's when alarm bells started ringing, not just in the UK press corps, but inside the deepest corners of Buckingham Palace. Because this wasn't just an image problem. It was a constitutional one. Here's the truth the public rarely hears. Granting a royal title to a child is more than a nod of approval. It's a recognition of bloodline, of legitimacy, of placement in the line of succession. Titles aren't just for show. They imply inheritance, protection, a bond to the crown so sacred that even Parliament can't easily undo it. So when Meghan requested those titles, especially after distancing herself from every royal duty, she wasn't just asking for status. She was demanding the monarchy publicly vouch for two children who have never been independently verified, never officially presented, and whose birth circumstances are riddled with inconsistencies. You think that's dramatic? Let's break it down. When Archie was born, the press wasn't allowed at the hospital. Meghan's team insisted on total privacy, rare for a royal birth. Then came the odd announcement delay. Hours passed before the palace made any formal declaration. Days passed before the public saw a single photo, and even then, the image was blurry, carefully staged, and showed no clear evidence of hospital departure, staff signatures, or anything resembling the normal protocol. As for Lilibet, her birth certificate was registered in California without a midwife's signature, with Meghan's job title listed as Princess of the United Kingdom, despite no longer using the HRH style. No UK media coverage. No christening attended by senior royals. No photo op. No documents filed at the College of Arms. Even her name, Lilibet, was a point of contention. Palace insiders claimed Queen Elizabeth was never asked permission to use her lifelong nickname. Meghan insisted she had, but no written proof ever surfaced. And through all of it, the royal family remained, publicly, silent. Until now, Charles's decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came after a series of meetings, pressure from William and Princess, and one chilling revelation we'll explore later in this video. The possibility that the crown was being manipulated into legitimizing something it couldn't verify. The stakes were clear. If Meghan succeeded in securing these titles, she would anchor herself forever in royal history, through her children. She could market, brand, and litigate around those names. She could appear at global events with Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet by her side. She could rewrite the narrative of her exile, not as a rejection, but as a triumph. And King Charles couldn't let that happen. He didn't just say no. He said enough. Enough with the half-truths. Enough with the leverage games. Enough with using children as pawns in a geopolitical power play. So the king did something bold, brave, and controversial. He ordered the final revocation of all remaining royal titles associated with Meghan Markle. That includes her right to be styled as Duchess of Sussex in official capacity. It includes her invitations to state events, her placement in the royal registry, her standing in the order of precedence. She is, for all intents and purposes, no longer royal. But Meghan's team isn't taking this quietly, not by a long shot. As we'll explore in the chapters ahead, this move triggered a full-scale counteroffensive from Meghan's legal team. Archwell's PR machine is working overtime, and Harry, caught in the crossfire, torn between the woman he loves and the crown that shaped him. Because buried inside this title dispute is a darker, more haunting question. What if Archie and Lilibet were never supposed to be royal in the first place? What if their very existence, publicly, legally, constitutionally, was never meant to be under royal jurisdiction at all? And what if King Charles knows more than he's letting on? Because what came next changed everything, and no one saw it coming. What would possess Meghan Markle to send a formal demand for royal titles when she knew it would ignite a firestorm? Was it arrogance, desperation, or something far more calculated? The letter didn't come through back channels. It wasn't whispered in discreet phone calls or hinted at during Christmas cards. It was official, typed, delivered, stamped with Archwell's legal insignia, and directed to the office of the private secretary at Buckingham Palace. Its arrival sent shockwaves through the royal corridors. Sources confirm the letter was addressed directly to King Charles III, not through Prince William, not through courtiers. It bypassed traditional etiquette entirely. That alone raised eyebrows. But it was the contents, cold, clinical, legalistic, that made the palace walls tremble. The request was clear. Prince Archie of Sussex, Princess Lilibet Diana of Sussex, with full HRH styling and constitutional recognition. Meghan wanted the monarchy to declare, in writing and in law, that her children were not just royal by name, but royal by blood, by rank, by birthright. To understand how radical that is, you need to grasp one thing. The British monarchy is not a fan of bold demands. It works on protocol, precedent, quiet influence. When Princess Diana gave explosive interviews in the 90s, she was shunned. When Prince Andrew created chaos, he was quietly erased from duties. The family doesn't confront. It removes. And yet Meghan didn't just confront the institution. She poked it with a flaming sword. According to leaked insider memos, the letter's tone was aggressive. That word was used more than once in confidential briefings. It wasn't a polite inquiry. It was a formal demand, accompanied by legal citations, precedent arguments, and the implicit threat of going public if the Crown failed to act. But here's where it gets truly strange. At the end of the document, Meghan included a footnote. Yes, a footnote that referenced the 1917 letters patent issued by King George V, which established who could and could not be titled prince or princess within the royal family. The same letters that Queen Elizabeth relied on when denying Prince Edward's children those titles. Meghan was using the monarchy's own rules against it. She claimed her children qualified. Her argument was that since Charles had ascended to the throne, Archie and Lilibet were now grandchildren of the reigning monarch through the male line, and therefore entitled to titles. This is technically accurate, but what Meghan ignored, or perhaps weaponized, was the unwritten rule. The monarch grants titles, not merely inherits them. And Charles wasn't in the mood to grant anything. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. By 10:14 a.m., it was logged by royal aides and routed for urgent review. Camilla was the first to see Charles's reaction. Eyewitnesses describe his face turning pale, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then came the chilling request. "I want the birth files. Both of them." At first, aides didn't move. The room froze. Then someone asked, "Your Majesty, are you certain?" Charles simply nodded. This is where things start to spiral. Because until that moment, Charles had never questioned the birth documentation of Archie or Lilibet, at least not publicly. But Meghan's demand forced his hand. By asking for legal recognition, she had inadvertently opened a constitutional can of worms. The palace's legal team began combing through archive correspondence, medical records, and historical entries tied to the births of both children. And what they found raised more questions than answers. Let's start with Archie. There was no official royal photographer at the hospital. Meghan and Harry had declined the customary Lindo wing presentation. Fine. Privacy, they said. But when staff tried to verify which hospital staff signed off on the birth certificate, there was a hiccup. The attending physician listed had no record of working that day. Then came Lilibet. Born in California, her birth certificate listed Meghan as Princess of the United Kingdom, a title she had not used since stepping down from royal duties. It was legally incorrect, but oddly, no correction had ever been issued. And there was no UK passport issued. No formal christening in the UK. No baptismal record recognized by the Church of England. No official portrait with the Queen. In fact, aside from a few photos posted on Meghan's friends' social media pages, Lilibet had never been seen publicly with any royal family member. That silence, once viewed as privacy, now looked more like concealment. Still, Charles didn't act. Not yet. He needed to be certain. So he turned to someone unexpected, Princess Anne. The Princess Royal has long been known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duty. She's loyal to the crown, blunt to a fault, and uninterested in press games. When Charles asked her opinion, she didn't hesitate. "You can't endorse what you can't verify," she said, according to one aide, and then added, "If you allow her to force your hand now, she'll try it again, with something worse." It was brutal, but it was the wake-up call Charles needed. Within 48 hours, palace lawyers were drafting a formal response. Not a rejection, a request for more information. They asked Meghan to provide certified birth documentation, including medical records, passport applications, and legal custody filings. They expected a delay. What they got was worse. Meghan's team refused. Flat out. They claimed the request was insulting, racist, and intrusive. They argued that no other royal mother had been asked to produce such documents. They implied Charles was retaliating because of Meghan's heritage, not legitimate protocol. The media didn't get wind of this right away, but insiders did. And suddenly, allies who once defended Meghan began backing away. quietly, cautiously, but undeniably. Because when a mother refuses to provide simple proof about her children's legal identity, especially while demanding state-recognized royal titles, people ask questions. Meghan didn't back down. She doubled down. Within days, Archwell issued a statement to select American outlets accusing the palace of colonial-era scrutiny and archaic double standards. They claimed Archie and Lilibet were being erased from royal history. But that wasn't true. They weren't being erased. They were being challenged. And King Charles, for the first time in his reign, wasn't backing down either. He summoned a closed-door council. Not the full Privy Council, but a subset of key constitutional advisors, legal experts, and royal historians. They discussed everything: precedent, succession, optics, and legal exposure. One advisor reportedly warned, if you grant these titles under pressure, you open the door to lawsuits, political demands, even inheritance claims, without proof of legitimacy. It was a sobering moment, and Charles made his decision. The titles would not be granted. Not now. Not ever. But he wasn't done. Because if Meghan wanted a legal battle, he would answer her with one final, devastating move. He ordered a full review of all remaining royal entitlements associated with Meghan Markle. And what they found shocked even him. There were still privileges being quietly extended to Meghan. Diplomatic security briefings, invitations to certain Commonwealth events, inclusion in historical registers. And technically, she still held the right to be styled as Duchess of Sussex. That would change. The machinery began moving. Legal drafters started preparing the letters of revocation. Aides were briefed on PR fallout. Allies were warned in advance. And Camilla, the Queen consort, made one chilling comment behind closed doors. She wanted to play royal without the rules, Camilla allegedly said. Now she'll see what happens when the rules fight back. And then it happened. A royal courier was dispatched to Montecito. Inside the envelope, a single page, stamped with the royal seal, signed by His Majesty King Charles III. And within its words, the beginning of Meghan Markle's total royal erasure. But the moment that courier arrived at Meghan's gate, something strange happened. Something the palace wasn't prepared for. And it would make this quiet war explode into global chaos. 2 children, countless headlines, but only a handful of verified facts. Ask yourself, how many times have you seen Prince George in the public eye? Princess Charlotte? Even little Prince Louis, known for his cheeky expressions at royal parades? Now compare that to Archie and Lilibet. Can you recall a single clear, unquestioned, verifiable moment where either child was seen publicly in the presence of senior royals, the press, or the public? Not in a Netflix documentary. Not in a stylized birthday photo. But in real life? No, you're not alone. This is the question that has haunted royal watchers, journalists, and insiders for years now. And it's not about obsessing over children's privacy. It's about patterns. Patterns that don't just suggest caution, but hint at concealment. Because from the moment Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor entered the world, nothing about his debut matched royal protocol. Let's rewind to May 2019. Meghan had vanished from public view for weeks. There was no traditional bump photo on hospital steps, no Lindo wing entrance, no flashbulbs, no statement about labor beginning. Only a cryptic announcement that the Duchess of Sussex has gone into labor and, curiously, has already given birth. Wait, what? Within minutes, Buckingham Palace issued a correction. The press was confused. Was she in labor or had she already given birth? What hospital? What staff? What records? It was a PR disaster cloaked in royal language. The public didn't even get a glimpse of baby Archie until 2 days later during an awkward photo call inside Windsor Castle. No crowd, no cheering, just Meghan, Harry, and a bundled infant in a white blanket. The image, cold, staged, controlled. And who took that photo? Not a press photographer. A personal friend of Meghan's team. The difference was seismic. Traditionally, royal births are public rituals. Diana, glowing with exhaustion outside the hospital. Kate, smiling but visibly sore in her pumps and polka dots. These moments are more than PR. They're proof. They're timestamps in the royal record. They say, this happened, and we share it with the nation. Meghan broke that tradition and replaced it with a narrative no one could verify. And the questions didn't stop there. The birth certificate, released weeks later, was strange. Meghan's name was listed as Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Fine. But the hospital? Portland Hospital in London. A private maternity unit with no confirmation from staff, no statement from doctors, and no one willing to go on record about attending the birth. In fact, one senior nurse who had been employed at the time later told a royal biographer, under anonymity, that no VIP matching Meghan's description was admitted that week. Now, of course, hospitals protect privacy. But with royals, there's always some trail. And this time, there wasn't. But it gets even murkier. A few months later, Archie's christening was held. Behind closed doors. No press. No video. No godparent announcement. No traditional silver font baptismal photos with the Archbishop of Canterbury. Just one still image released hours later, a formal portrait. Meghan and Harry seated. Archie cradled in white lace. The Queen absent. Prince Philip absent. Only Charles, Camilla, and Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, were visible. And here's where it got strange again. That photo, if you zoom in on Archie's face, looks off. Too smooth. Too filtered. As if edited. Enhanced. Some speculated it was doctored. Others whispered it wasn't Archie at all. Conspiracy? Maybe. But in the absence of transparency, theories thrive. Now let's jump to 2021. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor is born. But not in the UK. In Santa Barbara, California. Meghan gives birth in a private hospital. There is no press announcement until 2 days later. No medical records released. No witnesses. No photos from the hospital exit. Not even a paparazzi lens caught a single image of Meghan entering or leaving a maternity ward. The public is told she gave birth to a healthy baby girl named after Queen Elizabeth's childhood nickname. But the Queen, according to BBC and Palace sources, was not consulted before the name Lilibet was used. This was a major rift. The palace didn't correct it publicly, but they didn't endorse it either. And then the silence began again. Lilibet is never seen in public for the first year of her life. No christening in the UK. No official photographs. Not even a mention of godparents. When her birthday finally arrives in 2022, a single photo is released, taken in Meghan and Harry's garden, allegedly by a friend. Once again, not a press photographer, not a royal photographer, a friend. And there's no one else in the frame. No Charles, no William, no Kate, no one from the royal family. Why? Where were they? Even when Meghan and Harry returned to the UK for Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee in 2022, the children weren't seen. In fact, one aide reportedly told a biographer that the family was told the children were napping and unavailable for visits. For 3 days. Napping? For 3 days? Are you starting to see the pattern? Every opportunity to present the children alongside royal relatives was either declined, avoided, or sidestepped. Meghan's team consistently blamed privacy. But royal insiders began calling it something else entirely, obstruction. And it wasn't just the royals raising eyebrows. So were security experts. So were journalists. And so were intelligence officials. Yes, intelligence officials. One former MI5 contact reportedly flagged Meghan's refusal to allow background checks for domestic staff. This isn't gossip. It's protocol. Royal households undergo security assessments, especially when children with royal bloodlines are involved. But Harry and Meghan declined. And here's where things took a dark turn. In 2023, the UK Home Office reviewed the Sussexes security case after a legal appeal. One document, partially redacted, allegedly referred to irregularities in child protection requests. What did that mean? No one would say. But speculation grew that the Crown was quietly investigating whether it could lawfully bestow titles on 2 children it couldn't fully verify, either in terms of location, citizenship, or even parentage. And that's where King Charles drew the line. He reportedly asked to see all communication between Meghan's legal team and previous palace aides related to the births of Archie and Lilibet. What he found? Several missing files. Gaps in official correspondence. Notes indicating that Meghan's personal assistant had denied requests for verification in 2020 and 2021. One particularly damning note read, "Request for Lilibet's baptismal schedule denied. Family unavailable for travel. No confirmation of godparents. Security concerns cited." Another file mentioned photo staging discrepancies flagged by a former royal archivist who had refused to enter Meghan's images into the formal Windsor family registry. Let that sink in. Someone inside the palace refused to catalog Lilibet as a royal family member because the photo could not be independently verified. So again we ask, where are these children? Where are their appearances with family? Their official records? Their security arrangements? Their unedited moments? Because as of this chapter in the saga, no one, not even the king, had seen both children in person since Lilibet's birth. Even Harry, according to insiders, made separate visits to the UK without them. And Meghan's explanation? Privacy, safety, press harassment. But that excuse was wearing thin, especially when the Sussexes appeared at glitzy red carpet galas, private jet excursions, and celebrity-hosted fundraisers, while refusing to attend family funerals or royal christenings. The contradictions were piling up, and Charles had seen enough. He reportedly confided in William one night during a private walk on the Balmoral grounds. "They expect me to bless a lineage I've never met," Charles said. "They want me to give titles to children I've never held." William's response: "Then maybe it's time we stop pretending they're part of the line." Brutal, cold, but heartbreakingly real. Because beneath all the legal language and constitutional concerns lies a far deeper pain. A family torn apart. A father who can't trust his own son. A monarch forced to question the existence, yes, existence, of the next generation. And at the center of it all, silence. A silence more deafening than any scandal. A silence that Meghan thought would protect her narrative. But that silence, it's about to break. Because the next move from King Charles wouldn't be a request. It would be a royal decree. And what came next, no one saw coming. What drives a person to chase a crown they claim to have rejected? She said she didn't care about status. She said titles didn't define her. That all she ever wanted was peace, privacy, and the freedom to live her own truth. And yet, from the moment Meghan Markle stepped into the royal spotlight, she wasn't just chasing fame. She was chasing titles. Obsessively, ruthlessly. And now, that obsession may be the very thing that tears her legacy apart. Let's go back to the beginning. Before Duchess of Sussex. Before the palace balcony. Before the carriage ride. Meghan was an actress. Known best for her role on Suits. Admired by a niche following, but nowhere near global royalty. Then came Prince Harry. Their whirlwind romance captivated the media. A divorced American actress falling in love with a British royal? It felt like a modern fairy tale. And Meghan leaned into that narrative hard. She spoke of destiny, of rewriting history, of being a new kind of royal. But almost immediately, insiders began noticing something strange, an intensity, a fixation. Meghan wasn't just marrying Harry. She was marrying into rank, and she wanted everyone to know it. According to former palace staffers, Meghan took an early and unusual interest in how titles were assigned, used, and styled. She reportedly questioned why Kate was referred to as Princess of Wales, but she was only the Duchess of Sussex. She asked why she wasn't addressed as Princess Meghan. She even challenged why Archie wouldn't automatically become a prince at birth. Let's break that down. Under the 1917 letters patent, issued by King George V, only the children of the monarch, the children of the monarch's sons, and the eldest son of the Prince of Wales are automatically granted the titles of prince or princess. That meant that at the time of Archie's birth, he wasn't automatically a prince because he was the great-grandson of the monarch, not a grandson. But Meghan wasn't having it. She saw that Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, Kate's younger children, had royal titles. Why didn't hers? She didn't seem to care that the rules had been updated in 2012 by the Queen to extend titles to all of William's children. Meghan wanted her own children titled, even if the rules didn't support it. And so began the behind-the-scenes lobbying campaign that would quietly fracture the palace. Former aides have since disclosed that Meghan raised the topic of Archie's title multiple times during her pregnancy. First informally, then through her legal team. At one point, she allegedly demanded that Archie be granted HRH status from birth. Why? Because she believed it would provide automatic protection. Let's pause here. There's no royal protocol that says being called prince guarantees special security. That's a myth. Security is based on risk assessment, not titles. But Meghan's belief in the power of the title outweighed any practical reality. To her, it was status, branding, global currency. In fact, one aide recalls a meeting where Meghan allegedly said, "If he's not a prince, then what is he? Just nobody." That line, "just nobody," sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the room, because it revealed the truth. To Meghan, titles were more than family honors. They were tools, leverage, marketing gold. And that brings us to the real game, brand control. While still a working royal, Meghan and Harry attempted to trademark Sussex Royal across dozens of categories. From clothing to stationery, to digital downloads, to charitable foundations. The sheer scale of the application stunned the palace. It wasn't just about philanthropy. It was commercial domination. And when the Queen intervened to block the trademark, declaring that royal could not be used for private gain after stepping back from duties, Meghan was reportedly furious. She felt betrayed, said one insider. She thought the family was actively sabotaging her future, but it didn't stop her. She doubled down. After stepping back from duties, Meghan rebranded herself not as Meghan Markle, but as Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Every press release, every introduction, every award ceremony appearance carried the styling. Even on Netflix and Spotify deals, her team insisted that her title be included in promotional materials. The irony? She was marketing the very institution she claimed had oppressed her. And then came the lawsuits. When Meghan sued the Mail on Sunday over the publication of a private letter to her father, her legal filings repeatedly emphasized her status as a royal. She argued that her position warranted greater privacy, greater protection, and greater respect. It was a contradiction no one could ignore. On one hand, she said the crown silenced her. On the other, she invoked the crown's power when it suited her. But nowhere was this contradiction more glaring than in her bid for the children's titles. Let's revisit that for a moment. When Queen Elizabeth passed, Archie and Lilibet became, technically, grandchildren of the monarch. Meghan seized on that fact immediately. Not even a month after the Queen's funeral, rumors swirled that Meghan's team had submitted legal inquiries about formal title recognition. And yet, the public mood was raw, mourning, fragile. It felt like a calculated move. And for many in the royal family, it was a betrayal, especially for Charles. He had just buried his mother. He was adjusting to the throne. And here was Meghan, demanding royal titles for two children who hadn't even attended the funeral. It struck a nerve. And Charles wasn't the only one disturbed. Behind closed doors, William reportedly told aides, "This is all about leverage, not family," and, ever blunt, called the request disrespectful. And Camilla? She kept silent. But according to one aide, she whispered later that evening, "You give her an inch, and she builds a palace on it." Still, Meghan pressed forward. She began using subtle, strategic language in interviews, referring to her children's heritage, their birthright, their place in the family. Even on the Cut interview, Meghan dropped a bombshell when she said, "By existing, we were upsetting the hierarchy just by being there." It was a clear shot, and it wasn't the last. In her Netflix series, Meghan emphasized how title hypocrisy and racial bias played into the decision to not grant Archie a princely title. But the truth? She never understood the system. Or worse, she did, and deliberately twisted it. Because Meghan wasn't just obsessed with titles. She was obsessed with rewriting them, creating her own rules, forging a new royal identity, one foot inside the system, the other standing in rebellion. It was dangerous. Because it wasn't just public perception at stake. It was constitutional clarity. If Charles allowed her children to receive titles without full public vetting, he risked setting a precedent that could unravel centuries of royal protocol. It wouldn't just be about Archie and Lilibet. It would be about the next generation, about how the monarchy distinguishes between blood and brand. And that's why Meghan's obsession was so alarming, because it was never about tradition, or duty, or service. It was about power, and Charles saw it. So he made a decision, not just to deny the request, but to dismantle the entire illusion. Because what Meghan didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, was that Charles had been preparing something behind the scenes. A quiet strategy, a constitutional maneuver, a royal strike that would bring her obsession crashing down. And the first warning? It arrived not in a press release, not in a court filing, but in a private meeting with Prince William. And William's response? He's finally ready to do it. But what was it? What had Charles been holding back? And why, after years of restraint, was he now preparing to use it? What came next would shake the monarchy to its core. What does it take for a king to finally break? For King Charles III, it wasn't betrayal. He had endured that. It wasn't scandal. That came with the job. It wasn't even public humiliation, which he'd known since the Diana years. No, what finally made Charles snap was something far more personal. A letter. Not just the letter Meghan sent requesting titles for Archie and Lilibet. That was the spark. The last straw was what came after, when Meghan's team followed up with a not-so-subtle ultimatum. Either the palace confirmed the children's royal titles by the end of the quarter, or Meghan would explore alternative paths for legacy protection. Those 5 words, alternative paths for legacy protection, landed like a hammer on Charles's desk. The tone was unmistakable. Do it our way, or we go public. Again, it wasn't the first time Meghan had implied going nuclear. But this time, it felt different. Because this time, Charles wasn't just being asked to bend protocol. He was being told that if he didn't publicly acknowledge children he hadn't even been allowed to properly meet, he'd be painted as the villain in the next explosive tell-all. And that's when he snapped. It happened on a rainy afternoon in Balmoral. The wind howled through the corridors of the castle as Charles sat in the small private study, flanked by legal advisors and a single senior aide. Camilla had just left the room after reading the letter and muttering, "She's at it again." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the desk. Instead, he stared at the paper in his hands for nearly 2 minutes in silence. Then, in a voice more cold than angry, he said, "She's not leaving me any choice." The room froze. Charles turned to his advisors. "What's the fastest path to remove every title she holds? Every remaining association with the House of Windsor? I want it done. Fully. Formally. Publicly." One of the aides hesitated. "Your Majesty, that would be extreme." Charles looked up, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. "So is using my grandchildren as leverage." And just like that, it was set in motion, Operation Severance. But before we get there, let's rewind. Because Charles didn't wake up that day planning to start a royal war. In fact, just a week earlier, he had been entertaining ideas of reconciliation. Quiet phone calls with Harry. Soft diplomacy. The possibility, however remote, of healing the wound that had torn the family apart. Until Meghan's demand landed. What she didn't realize was that while Charles had tolerated her slights, her interviews, and her accusations, there was one line he would never cross. Using children, his grandchildren, as pawns to manipulate constitutional recognition. That wasn't just disrespectful. It was dangerous, and it had precedent. Charles had spent a lifetime watching how scandal and manipulation nearly destroyed the monarchy. He'd seen how Edward VIII's abdication to marry Wallis Simpson opened wounds that still hadn't fully healed. How Diana's media battles turned the public into spectators of royal pain. He wasn't going to let history repeat itself, especially not at the hands of someone who seemed more interested in headlines than heritage. So he picked up the phone. The first call was to Prince William. And that conversation, according to insiders, was the turning point. At first, William was quiet. He listened as his father explained the situation, read sections of Meghan's letter aloud, and outlined the disturbing implications of confirming royal titles without verifiable documentation. And then William responded, "If you don't act now, Dad, she'll define our legacy. Not you." That sentence hit hard. Because for Charles, legacy is everything. His entire reign, however short or long, will be judged not just by policy or pageantry, but by whether he preserved the dignity of the crown in an age where dignity is under constant attack. And Meghan had become the most high-profile threat to that dignity. But it wasn't just William supporting the move. Enter Princess Anne. The Princess Royal, ever the pragmatist, was summoned for a private meeting with Charles the following morning. When told of Meghan's request and the threat of yet another media storm, and didn't hesitate. "She's daring you to act," and said bluntly, "So act. And don't look back," and had always viewed Meghan with skepticism, not because of her background, but because of her behavior, the self-promotion, the disregard for protocol, the endless victim narratives. In Anne's eyes, Meghan was a disruption with no loyalty to the institution she once married into. And now, and believed, Charles had the perfect justification to sever the final tie. But it still wasn't an easy decision. Charles is not a cruel man. He is, if anything, deeply sentimental. That's why he tolerated so much for so long. For Harry, for Diana's memory, for the public. But now, it was about something bigger than family. It was about the monarchy itself. And as the letters began being drafted, Charles prepared to make the biggest constitutional move of his reign thus far. But here's the twist. Before he signed off, Charles wanted one final confirmation. One final shred of proof that would justify removing Meghan's remaining title. So he did something shocking. He requested an internal review of all interactions between Meghan and the royal household during her time as a working royal. Emails, meeting transcripts, staff reports, and what surfaced? A pattern, not just of miscommunication, but manipulation. Multiple accounts of Meghan allegedly pressuring staff to use her title for non-royal endeavors. One aide recalled Meghan insisting that a speech she gave at a women's charity be rebranded as a formal Sussex engagement, even though it hadn't been sanctioned by the palace. Another internal report noted Meghan's repeated efforts to secure solo international travel under the pretense of royal diplomacy, while simultaneously negotiating private media deals on the side. And then came the final straw. A record from 2019 in which Meghan allegedly asked whether she could license certain royal images of her and Harry to help establish a Sussex-branded content platform. That platform, Archwell. It all clicked. Meghan had spent her time in the monarchy not learning royal duties, but testing royal boundaries. And now she was trying to leverage her children as the next move on the chessboard. Charles had had enough. He gave the order. Within 48 hours, an emergency royal decree was prepared. A formal revocation of Meghan's right to use the title Duchess of Sussex in any commercial, public, or diplomatic setting. While the peerage technically remained, since it was tied to Harry, the styling would be removed from all official registers and documents. The title would become ceremonial only. A ghost title. No power. No status. No recognition. Just words on paper. Charles wanted the public to know Meghan Markle was no longer a royal in any meaningful way. But even that wasn't enough. He wanted the world to see that the monarchy still had teeth. So he arranged something rarely done outside of abdications, a formal press statement. Short, decisive, worded with surgical precision. And its final sentence? The Crown no longer recognizes any title, styling, or station held by Meghan Markle in association with the House of Windsor. Brutal. Unforgiving. Final. It sent shockwaves through the Commonwealth, across social media, and deep into Meghan's inner circle. Because not only had Charles severed her ties, he had erased her from the present royal hierarchy. And according to sources, when Meghan read that line, she went silent. But what happened next wasn't silence. Because as the press exploded with headlines and royal commentators scrambled to react, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something no one, not even Charles, was prepared for. A leaked audio recording. A hot mic. A private moment caught during a podcast taping. And Meghan's reaction? Not grief. Not shock. Laughter. But not the warm kind. Cold. Bitter. Sarcastic. And then, 4 words. He finally did it. And then a pause. Let's burn it down. What did she mean? Was it metaphor? Was it literal? Or was it the beginning of a new war? Because whatever Charles thought would bring closure was about to open the door to a full-blown counterattack. And Meghan? She had already planned her next move. They called it a conspiracy. They called it cruel. They called it racist. But what if the rumors about Archie and Lilibet's DNA weren't just tabloid fodder? What if they were a whispered truth, one the palace tried to ignore for years, until Meghan herself forced them to confront it? Because the moment she demanded royal titles for Archie and Lilibet, the whispers became a roar. And that roar reached the ears of King Charles III. Let's go back to the source. Long before titles were ever in question. Long before the Oprah interview or the Megxit drama, there was one unsettling question swirling behind palace doors. Why was so little known about Archie's birth? Forget public speculation. Inside the royal inner circle, aides and legal advisors had been quietly uncomfortable with the gaps. Gaps in documentation, gaps in protocol, and yes, gaps in physical access. It started in 2019 when Meghan declined to give birth at the Lindo wing, a royal tradition for decades. Fair enough. Privacy is a right. But what followed raised red flags. A late announcement, conflicting reports, confusion over which hospital she even delivered in. Then came the christening. No public viewing. No photos of godparents. No confirmation of the ceremony's officiant. Royal insiders were stunned, but they kept quiet. The Queen insisted on peace. Charles, still hoping for reconciliation, told aides, let them have their privacy. But not everyone agreed. Behind the scenes, senior royal courtiers began quietly asking legal and constitutional advisors a chilling question. What if we're asked to grant royal status to children whose lineage we cannot confirm? It wasn't personal. It was procedural. And yet, the question was radioactive. Dangerous. Untouchable. Until Meghan pushed the crown to act. Because by requesting titles for Archie and Lilibet, she did more than assert their place in the royal family. She asked the monarchy to publicly certify their legitimacy. And for the monarchy, that certification carries constitutional weight. Why? Because royal titles aren't just honorific. They're dynastic. They signify bloodline, inheritance, eligibility for the line of succession. Which is why, when Meghan demanded titles in writing, knowing the children had never been physically presented to the Queen, knowing the palace had limited documentation, she set off alarms that had long been suppressed. And King Charles? He finally acted. According to multiple palace sources, Charles authorized a confidential inquiry, not a public investigation, but an internal audit of lineage verification. The mission traced the full legal and biological paper trail of Archie and Lilibet. What came back? Gaps, discrepancies, and, most shockingly, 2 classified documents. Let's start with Archie. One internal report confirmed that the attending physician listed on Archie's birth certificate had never spoken to palace staff. He had declined to participate in any postnatal royal briefings. His name, though accurate on the certificate, was listed under a corporate health entity, making it nearly impossible to verify if he had actually delivered the child. The hospital? Portland. But no security logs placed Harry or Meghan there on the day of birth. Odd. Yes, but plausible? Still within the realm of privacy. Then came Lilibet. The audit found that her birth certificate, filed in California, had inconsistencies. No midwife name. No hospital staff signatures. No record of formal witness notarization. Even more curious? The field for mother's occupation read, Princess of the United Kingdom. But Meghan had renounced active royal status over a year earlier, and had never been formally styled as a princess. It wasn't just an error. It was a legal contradiction. And that contradiction triggered a second review, this time by Crown legal advisors. That's when things got darker. A confidential note, redacted for public protection, was discovered in the Privy Council's file archive. The note was dated mid-2021, authored by a senior royal aide, and referenced an informal offer from a non-governmental party to fund independent DNA verification of the children should the need for succession validation arise. Let that sink in. Someone outside the royal family was so concerned about lineage authenticity, they offered to pay for DNA testing to secure the monarchy's constitutional integrity. Charles reportedly refused the offer, out of principle, but the note was filed, and now it was being revisited. Because Charles knew what few others did, that Meghan's demand for royal titles meant the crown had to publicly affirm that Archie and Lilibet were biologically descended from Prince Harry. And Harry? He had gone eerily silent on the issue. In fact, during multiple high-profile interviews, he never directly referred to the children as part of the line of succession. He spoke about them, of course, but never in those terms. Not once did he say, "My children, who are royal by blood, deserve to be prince and princess." Why? Was he simply protecting their privacy? Or was he unsure? And here's where the whispers turned sinister. One insider, speaking under condition of anonymity, revealed a private conversation that took place between Harry and a senior palace confidant in early 2020. The quote, "I don't even know if they'll let me near her after this. I'm not sure where I stand anymore." Who was her? Many believe it was Meghan. Some, however, believe it referred to Lilibet, who had not yet been born. Was Harry expressing doubt? Fear? Was it the stress of exile speaking? We may never know. But here's what we do know. In late 2022, a private investigator hired by a UK tabloid claimed to have discovered that no travel records existed showing Meghan or Harry returning to the UK with Lilibet for any christening ceremony. Even more alarmingly, he stated that every effort to trace official child immunization records or early child care logs in the UK has hit a dead end. It's like they've never been here. And yet, Meghan continued insisting her children were rightful heirs to royal titles. And that brings us to the quiet war now raging inside the crown. Charles, out of love for Harry, has avoided public confrontation. He didn't demand DNA tests. He didn't release the audits. But Meghan's legal push? That changed everything. Because a monarchy cannot afford ambiguity, especially not in the digital age, when perception is reality and every post, photo, and podcast becomes evidence. And the public? They're beginning to notice. Royal commentators are asking what the palace refuses to say. Why are there no spontaneous photos of Archie in the UK? Why did the Queen never issue a formal welcome to Lilibet? Why were the children's names missing from key royal registers? And why did the palace quietly delay updating the royal website's line of succession for weeks after Lilibet's birth? It wasn't an accident. It was hesitation. Because behind the scenes, they were grappling with the unthinkable. What if the children in question are not who Meghan claims they are? Not in existence? Not biological? Not eligible? It's a question so incendiary, most refuse to even utter it. But it's real. And Charles now stands at a crossroads. To protect the monarchy's future, he may soon be forced to demand transparency, or risk letting his silence become an endorsement of deception. And Meghan? She's not backing down. According to leaked communications, her legal team is now preparing a new defense strategy, a pivot that may include refusing further inquiries on the grounds of child protection and racial targeting. It's a tactic designed to force the palace into retreat. But Charles? This time, he's not flinching. And there's one more twist. Because just days before Meghan's latest demand, a second DNA-related document surfaced, this time from a former royal staff member, now living in Canada. In it, she describes being instructed in 2019 not to refer to Archie as Prince in internal communications, even before any formal announcement from the Queen. Why? Because the palace allegedly had not received adequate confirmation of full biological lineage from both parents. Let that phrase sink in. Both parents. And who was missing? Harry or Meghan? The implications are staggering. And if even a fraction of it is true, then everything Meghan built, every brand, every speech, every claim to royal connection, is a house of cards. And it's about to collapse. Because Charles isn't the only one asking questions now. The public is waking up. The media is circling. And behind closed doors, someone else, someone very close to the chaos, is preparing to go public. But who? And what do they know? What comes next could destroy the entire narrative. You can lose a crown and still keep power. But when Hollywood turns its back on you, you're done. For years, Meghan Markle cultivated an image that transcended royalty. She positioned herself not just as a duchess, but as a global icon, an activist, a visionary, a victim-turned-victor. And where the British monarchy distanced itself, Hollywood embraced her. Or so it seemed. Because in Tinseltown, power is currency, and association is everything. And when Meghan began bleeding influence, one by one, her allies quietly vanished. So what triggered the Hollywood exodus? It wasn't just the title scandal. It wasn't just the silence surrounding Archie and Lilibet. It was the fact that Meghan, once seen as untouchable, had become a liability. Let's start with the Netflix situation. When Harry and Meghan signed their eye-watering $100 million deal with the streaming giant, it was hailed as a game-changer. Netflix got exclusive access to their authentic lives, their truth, and their mission. But behind the scenes, Netflix executives quickly realized they'd been sold a fairy tale with no castle. The Sussexes delivered a glossy documentary series, sure, but it was short on substance, padded with stock footage, and riddled with inconsistencies. Viewership peaked during week 1, then plummeted. Even worse, Netflix began receiving quiet calls from high-profile producers warning that Meghan was difficult, controlling, and litigation-prone. Creative teams were reluctant to collaborate. Writers hesitated to pitch. Why? Because Meghan had developed a reputation. If you questioned her, you were labeled a bigot. If you corrected her, you were silenced. And in a town built on delicate egos and brand safety, that's a death sentence. Spotify came next. After releasing just one season of her Archetypes podcast, the streaming platform pulled the plug. Internally, execs grumbled about lackluster content and unreasonable demands. One producer reportedly said, "Working with her was like walking on broken glass in heels. Loud, painful, and always a risk." Ouch. But it didn't stop there. Meghan had once been photographed laughing with Serena Williams, dining with Oprah, and exchanging texts with Beyoncé. But suddenly, nothing. No reposts. No shoutouts. No public support. Even Serena, one of Meghan's most vocal defenders, failed to mention her during multiple recent interviews. Insiders say the tennis icon was hurt by Meghan's habit of name-dropping her in interviews without context or consent, especially when it dragged Serena into the race debate surrounding the royal family, a firestorm she never asked to be part of. Then there's Oprah, the woman who gave Meghan and Harry the single most high-profile platform in their history. The 2021 interview changed the game. Accusations of racism, suicidal thoughts, a palace concerned about skin tone. It was raw, explosive, headline-making. But fast forward to 2025, and Oprah is curiously quiet. When asked during a red carpet event whether she still spoke to Meghan, Oprah gave a practiced smile and said, "I wish everyone the best on their journey." Diplomatic? Yes, but pointedly noncommittal, especially for a woman who once referred to Meghan as "my friend." So what changed? 2 words. Public perception. After years of sympathetic coverage, the tide had turned. Americans, once enchanted by Meghan's Cinderella narrative, began asking questions. Where were the children? Why were there no updated photos? Why did Meghan seem more concerned with brand deals than transparency? And why? Why? Was she still using royal titles while publicly trashing the very institution that gave them to her? The contradictions became impossible to ignore. And in Hollywood, no one wants to be the last celebrity standing next to a sinking ship. Enter the Kardashians. Love them or hate them, the Kardashian-Jenner clan is the unofficial royalty of American fame. When Meghan reportedly reached out to Kris Jenner about collaborative charity work and brand crossovers, she was met with silence. Why? Because even Kris, queen of controversy, understood that Meghan's name had become too hot to handle. And then came the moment that made everything crystal clear. A high-profile A-list gala, one that Meghan expected to attend as a guest of honor, quietly rescinded her invitation. Why? Because several major sponsors threatened to pull out if she appeared. The internal memo leaked within hours. It read, "Concerns over current public sentiment regarding Ms. Markle's ongoing disputes with the monarchy, child visibility, and misinformation claims." That was it. The line crossed. And Meghan? She was livid. Sources close to her claim she blamed British media influence for sabotaging her Hollywood reputation. But the truth? Hollywood wasn't following the tabloids. It was following her behavior. From lawsuits to accusations, from blurred truths to bombshell interviews. Meghan had made headlines, but not allies. And Harry? He was caught in the crossfire. Friends like David Beckham, once reportedly close to the Sussexes, distanced themselves after Meghan allegedly accused Victoria Beckham of leaking stories. The Beckhams were furious. David, deeply loyal to the royal family, cut ties completely. And the list goes on. Reese Witherspoon, once excited to collaborate on women-led projects, now silent. Cynthia Erivo, spotted at multiple Archwell events in 2022, absent ever since. Even Ellen DeGeneres, who once fawned over baby Lilibet's supposed birth, hasn't uttered Meghan's name in recent interviews. It was a mass exodus, and Meghan felt it. She tried to rebuild. She hired new PR, new agents, even considered launching her own lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, a hybrid of Goop and the Tig. But without A-listers, it fell flat. Because influence isn't just what you say. It's who stands beside you when you say it. And Meghan? She was alone. Even at award shows, she was seated further from center stage. Her surprise appearances were no longer surprises. They were strategic PR moves, carefully negotiated and often tied to charitable clauses. And while she smiled on red carpets, the whispers behind her back grew louder. She used us. She overplayed her hand. She believed the hype. And worst of all, she thought the monarchy was a stepping stone. Because in Hollywood, ambition is admired. But delusion? Delusion is deadly. And Meghan's refusal to adapt, to acknowledge the shifting tides, turned admiration into irritation. The final nail? An exposé by a well-respected entertainment journalist, alleging that Meghan had been blacklisting media outlets that dared question her narrative. The article went viral, and Meghan's team denied it. Of course, but the damage was done, because the headline wasn't just trending, it was resonating. Suddenly, people weren't afraid to say what they really thought. That Meghan had weaponized her victimhood, that she had manipulated Hollywood's empathy, that she had turned every relationship into a transaction. And now?